Hey guys, tonight, we're opening the creaky unwashed door to one of the most notorious professions in history. Victorian sex work. Tonight we're going straight past the petticoats, under the gaslights, and into a world that's somehow both scandalous and honestly exhausting. Not the glamorous storybook version with lace fans and mysterious gentlemen callers, but the real gritty knockoff perfume version. Before yoga laps onto your freshly laundered sheets, the kind Victorians would have killed for. Do me a small favor, tap that like button, subscribe for more historical miseries, and comment below with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. For some of you, it's probably 2 o'clock in the morning, which is ironically also peak shift in a Victorian brothel. Now, dim those lights. Turn on your fan for some soothing white noise, and get comfortable, preferably in pajamas that smell like gin and despair. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what it was really like to Makia, living under Queen Victoria's disapproving gaze? Did sex workers have business cards? What happened if your only pension plan was the lost and found box at the local gin palace? Did Victorian Londoners actually call it the world's oldest profession? Or were they too busy, pretending not to know where all those silk stockings were coming from? Would you survive a night in a freezing attic room with nothing but a chipped mug and an unpaid tab at Mrs. Dabble's stew kitchen? How many euphemisms for sex work can one society invent before it just runs out of synonyms and starts calling everything feelin'? And what's the deal with those red lamps anyway? Did they come in bulk packs? Congratulations, you've just woken up in 1883 in the heart of London's underbelly. The streets are foggy, the air is thick with secrets, and your landlord is already banging on the door for rent. Good luck. The sun tries to slip through a foggy window, only to give up and crawl away, which is honestly a mood. You wake up on a mattress stuffed with old newspapers, wrapped in a blanket that smells Vigeliov, cheap gin, pickled onions, and something you really hope is mothballs. Somewhere in the corridor, a floorboard groans, loud enough to remind you that privacy here is more of a concept than aeriality. You try to move, but your leg is tangled in last night's petticoat, and your arm is asleep. Not in a relaxing way. In the how much nerve damage did I just take way? Your pillow, such as it is, might be an old winter coat folded in half, or possibly a moderately clean flour sack. Luxury is relative. It's cold, too. Not the charming brisk kind of cold. You two make cocoa. But the damp, creeping chill of a room with one single glazed window, and a draft that whistles like a judgmental ant. Somewhere a mouse is having a breakfast meeting in the wall, while a neighbor in the next room coughs with the sort of authority that only comes from a steady diet of coal dust, gin, and unresolved childhood trauma. Your first big decision of the day. Do you get up and risk stepping on the communal chamber pot, or just pretend you're still asleep until someone else braves the cold first? You check your feet, still attached, only slightly damp, small victories. The floor is sticky, but you ask with what? That way lies madness. Somewhere above you, the Brothels matron, Mrs. Sprocket, is already clamping around in boots made for intimidation and ankle support. She's loudly encouraging everyone to be up and respectable by 8, or as close to respectable as a house of Elroot can manage. If you're slow, she'll bang on your door and call you Miss Lazybones, which is unfair, because in this place, sleep is a full contact sport. You rummage for your slippers. One of them is definitely not yours, but you don't have the energy to solve. The mystery of the 3 left shoes. The air smells of lavender water, coal smoke, and last night's perfume, which mixed together could probably strip paint off a wall. You pass the looking glass hanging crookedly on the door. It's not a confidence booster. Your hair is doing some nothing that defies both gravity and social norms. And your makeup, such as it was, has migrated into a new zip code on your face. There's a smudge that might be mascara, or possibly last night's beef stew. Either way, it's not coming off. You pick your way down the hall, careful not to wake Millie, who's asleep in the bathtub, or step on one of Doris's decorative hairpins, which double as calrops for the unwary. The staircase cacks a warning as you head toward the kitchen, clutching your shawl around you. Downstairs, a pot offerage simmers, guarded by Mrs. Sprocket, as though it's the crown jewels. Breakfast is strictly rationed Becco's waist, not, want not, and you lot eat like you've got hollow legs. There's a brief moment of camaraderie around the battered kitchen table, as you and the other girls trade war stories from the night before. Laughter bubbles up a little too loud, a little too sharp, but it's laughter nonetheless. There's comfort in routine, the same old complaints about clients, the eternal search for a clean cup, and the quiet, unspoken agreement that no one mentions anything embarrassing before coffee. You scrape together a semblance off breakfast, watery oats, a chunk of dubious bread, and the last dregs of tea, sweetened with hope and whatever's left in the sugar bowl. The world outside is muffled by fog and horse hooves, the city's heartbeat, just audible through the rattling glass. And so the day begins, not with glamour, not with luxury, but with resilience, a little bit of wit, and the unspoken promise that you'll get through another day somehow against the odds you always do. Welcome to the morning after Victorian style. Getting dressed means assembling a wardrobe from the discount bin of history. Corsets too tight to breathe, not tight enough to keep out judgmental glances. Stockings, possibly stolen, probably mismatched, and always with more holes than hope. You wake up every morning, tough grim reality that your fashion choices are mostly determined by what hasn't been pwned, ruined, or lost to Doris in last week's card game. The first item, the infamous corset. This is a garment and more, a declaration of war on your internal organs. You pull it on, yanking the laces tighter and tighter, wondering if today's the day your ribs simply throw in the towel and leave the building. Victorian societies, a woman's waist should be no more than 18 in, which is a lovely goal, provided you have a bone saw and zero internal organs. Next come the petticoats. You'd love to waft around in layers of pristine muslin, but what you've got is a skirt with more patches than original fabric, and a bustle that's been rested so many times it now contains 3 old socks, a rag, and possibly a sandwich from 1879. The fabric itches, the seams scratch, and heaven help you if you have to run. You'll either trip and go down like a toppled bookshelf, or your hem will catch on a loose nail, and the whole outfit will unravel like a tragic magic trick. Stockings are the Victorian equivalent of modern-day socks with holes, but make it fashion. They're never quite the same length. They roll down at inopportune moments, and one pair might boast a hand-stitched rose, while the other just sports a mysterious stain. Garter belts, if you're lucky, they're just tight enough to hold things up, but loose enough to not cut off circulation. If not, you're in for a night of performing adjustment ballet for a time you stand up. Your shoes, if you can even call them that, are either slightly too small or big enough to fit a family of mice. If you're feeling extravagant, you might have heels, chunky, battered, and just stylish enough to give you blisters in places you didn't know existed. Leather cracks, buckles break, and you can forget about arch support. After a full night's work, your feet feel like you've tap danced on cobblestones. For Queen and Country, now comes the showpiece, your dress. The kind of thing meant to catch the eye, distract from your exhaustion, and maybe, just maybe, impress the kind of client who doesn't count his coins twice. In reality, it's probably made from whatever was on sale at the rag market, covered in lace that's more whole than thread, and finished with ribbons that used to be white, but now resemble Victorian gray. You smooth it out, hiding stains with strategic folds and an air of optimism. Accessories are crucial, not because they're pretty, but because they cover up last night's bruises, rashes, or the kind of hickeys that even the church ladies would struggle to forgive. A locket with someone else's initials, a cameo brooch bought from a porn shop, maybe a little hair ribbon that's supposed to make you look fresh, as if anyone in this house has been fresh since 1875. Makeup is applied with a heavy hand in low expectations. Face powder is chalky, made from rice, lead, or something with a skull and crossbones on the label. Rouge is dabbed on cheeks and you line your eyes with a stub of charcoal stolen from the kitchen stove. Lip color, a little beet juice, if there's any left from breakfast. You'll check your reflection in a warped mirror, give yourself a wink, and decide it's good enough. There's an art to looking alluring, but not desperate. Fashionable, but not too available. A tightrope walk across a social abyss, with only your busted shoes for balance. Every layer you add is both a shield and a statement. I am here. I am for her and I will survive even if my outfit doesn't. You step out onto the street, chin up, corset digging in, stockings sliding down, and pray the fog hides at least half of your ensemble. And there you have it. The Victorian sex worker uniform, threadbare, hopeful, and just functional enough to face another day. You sit at a rickety table, faced with two options. Week old bread that could double as a murder weapon, or watery porridge from the downstairs kitchen. Both are slightly improved by the addition of a splash of gin, medicinal purposes only. The first sound you hear is the groan of a chair that's probably been patched more times than your dress. The tablecloth is a relic stained with last year's stew, and this morning's regret. There's a dented tin mug at your place, and you're not entirely sure it's the same one you used yesterday. In Victorian London, breakfast is less of a meal and more of a negotiation between your appetite, your wallet, and the mysterious gray blob in the communal bowl. You size up the bread. It's the color of hopelessness and twice as tough. Last week, someone chipped a tooth on a similar loaf, and the local dentist still hasn't forgiven you. If you manage to tear off a chunk, you can either chew with determination, or soak it in your tea until it turns to mush, though that assumes you have tea, and that it's not already occupied by a small flotilla of unidentifiable crumbs. On lucky days, there's porridge. Porridge is a generous term. It's more of an existential crisis in a bowl, pale, lukewarm, and lumpy enough to pass as building material. Every bite is a new texture, sometimes smooth, sometimes with the surprise crunch of a weevil thought survived. The night, you pretend not to notice, stirring in a bit of sugar if you can find it, or more realistically, scraping the bottom of the sugar bowl and convincing yourself that sweetness is a state of mind. It's not just you at the table, either. You're joined by the rest of the house's cast. Women with tired eyes, hair pinned up with forks and shawls pulled tight against the morning chill. There's Millie, who always manages to snag the crustiest bit of bread, and Doris, who can somehow make a mug of gin last all the way to lunchtime. Conversation is minimal. No one here is a morning person. Instead, there are grunts of acknowledgement, sighs of resignation, and the occasional hopeful glance at the kitchen door in case Mrs. Sprocket decides to surprise everyone with a boiled egg. She won't. The kitchen itself is chaos. Mrs. Sprocket rules over her domain with a wooden spoon and a scowl. She claims the secret to good porridge is elbow grease and low expectations. Occasionally she'll throw in a turnip or reef times a flush, a few lentils, but mostly it's oats, water, and the kind of culinary optimism that borders on denial. On especially tight weeks, breakfast is replaced entirely by a quick dash of gin or medicinal tonic, which tastes suspiciously like gin and vinegar, and occasionally leaves you blind in one eye for an hour. Breakfast of champions, Millie jokes, knocking back a shot and wincing. The rest of you follow suit, reasoning that if the food doesn't kill you, at least the gin will make you forget about your hunger for a little while. Sometimes a client from last night leaves behind something edible, a bruised apple, a lump of cheese with a suspicious blue corner, or a meat pie that's already taken on a second life as a science experiment. There's an unspoken code about these ones. Share with the house, but keep your favorites hidden for later. You tuck Acrist into your pocket for lunch, or possibly as a weapon against future bread-based assaults. The meal winds down in silence, spoons clinking against tin, the smell of boiled oats and desperation mixing with the first hints of coal smoke from the street outside. You stare out the window as the city wakes up. Fog rolling in, carriages rattling past, and children shouting on the corner. There's no time to linger. You scrape your bowl, brush the crumbs from your skirt, and steel yourself for another day. Because in Victorian London, breakfast isn't about luxury or comfort. It's about survival, resourcefulness, and the kind of camaraderie that only grows. In place where the food is never quite enough, and the laughter is always just a little too loud for morning. And if all else fails, there's always more gin. Before you hit the streets, there's work to do. Dabbing questionable face powder to hide the circles under your eyes. Using beet juice for blush, and praying the latest miracle skincare tonic doesn't burn another hole in your face. Your morning routing in the brothel is less a spa experience, and more an exercise in controlled chaos and mild chemical warfare. There are no scented candles or calming music, just a wobbly mirror, a handful of communal combs, and a sense of urgency because Mrs. Sprocket starts shouting about standards the moment she's had her first cup of tea. You line up your arsenal on the cracked washstand, a stub of soap, a battered hairbrush missing half its bristles, and an array of creams and powders that would give a modern dermatologist night terrors. First, the face powder, if you're lucky. It's mostly rice flour or crushed chalk. If you're not, it might be mixed with a dash of lead. Victorian makeup's dirty little secret. White as a ghost, soft as a corpse, the advertisements promised. You pat it on, hoping for ethereal beauty, but settling for not obviously dying. The goal isn't to look healthy, it's to look just fragile enough that some romantic fool might try to rescue you, or at least pay extra for the illusion. Dark circles are public enemy number one. The solution: a thick layer of powder, and a prayer that the morning sun never gets bright enough to show. Blush comes next. Swiped on cheeks with the same gentle touch you'd use to cover a bruise from last night. Slively client. Beet juice is the favorite. Partly because it's cheap, partly because it makes you smell like salad. If you're flush with cash, you might splurge on some imported rouge from France, which in a cruel twist often causes more rashes than romance. Lips get a dab of color too, sometimes beet juice, sometimes the dregs of a red crayon melted over a candle flame. The look is rosy and youthful, or as closely as you can manage, when the only hydration you've had in days is a shot of gin and a wish for eye makeup. It's a stub of charcoal stolen from the hearth, or a little lamp black applied with a nervous finger. You aim for smoldering, but the results usually land somewhere between mysterious temptress and coal miner with regrets. Hair. Is its sound battleground? The average Victorian brothel didn't employ a stylist, unless you count Doris, who once gave someone bangs with the sewing shears and a sense of misplaced confidence. Hot water is rare and precious, so dry shampooing is performed, with handfuls of flour or talc, massaged in and brushed out until your scalp looks slightly less like a bird's nest. Pins and combs are traded like currency. Hairpieces, if you have one, are maintained with spit, hope, and at least toned silent prayer per knot. If you have any miracle lotions or patent remedies, this is the time to apply them. Each bottle promises radiant skin, but the fine print should really read results, may include redness, swelling, or spontaneous combustion. Still, you soldier on, dabbing dubious liquid on your jaw, ignoring the sting and quietly congratulating yourself for not buying last week's quick, easy freckle remover. That one left Millie with a rash so Reg started charging extra for the lobster look. There's always a final inspection before you head out. Mrs. Sprocket gives you the once-over, squinting through the fog of her own face powder, making sure you look presentable, which, in this world, means no obvious wounds, no leftover stew in your hair, and no makeup so dramatic it might startle the clergy. You take one last glance in the warped mirror, adjust a curl, and brace yourself. The Cup in Victorian London isn't about self-expression. It's armor, a mask, a little magic spell you cast to keep the world at bay, if only until you're back at the breakfast table. Then, with cheeks flushed and lips painted, you step out into the morning fog, part illusion, part survivor, and voila, ready to face whatever the city throws at you. Meet Mrs. Sprocket, the brothel keeper. She's equal parts mother hen, debt collector, and amateur drill sergeant. She'll lecture you about respectability with one hand, while pocketing half your wages with the other. Mrs. Sprocket has ruled over her establishment for so long that you suspect she was born behind the front desk, already clutching a register and a rolling pin. No one's quite sure how old she is, because no one's ever seen her take a day off, blink, or leave the house without at least 3 shawls draped over her shoulders. She moves with surprising speed for someone whose knees sound like a percussion section, and her voice can cut through the thickest gin fog in the kitchen. The first thing you hear in the morning is your signature bellow. Up and at 'em, girls. We're not running a flop house, you know? This is followed by a round-off hut, can only be described as motivational criticism, reminding you to keep your rooms tidy, your face presentable, and your clientele paying. She bark about standards while adjusting a chipped teapot and scooping last night's coins into her apron pocket, humming off-key and side-eyeing the staircase for signs of ming. For all her bluster, Mrs. Sprocket is the closest thing to family most of ya have left. She remembers birthdays, sort of. She'll give you an extra ladle of porridge on your special day, and Mabel let you off early if you've had a rough week. Of course, she'll also remind you that no one else will put up with your antics, usually while waving a rent ledger thick enough to stun a medium-sized goat. Her affections are strictly rationed, like butter in a famine, but they exist. Somewhere under all those layers of shawl and sarcasm, there's a heart, possibly pickled, but beating nonetheless. Financially, Mrs. Sprocket is both the bank and the bafe. She advance you a little coin if your shoes are falling apart, but interest rates are calculated by a system known only to her and the devil. Miss a payment, and you'll get a lecture about personal responsibility that doubles as a cautionary tale for the entire breakfast table. Every penny is counted, every loan remembered, and if you ever try to run up a tab at the Gin Palace, trust that news will reach her before you do. There are rules here, and Mrs. Sprocket enforces them with a mix of threats and unspoken loyalty. No bringing in troublemakers, no cheating the house, no fighting in the common areas, unless you're quiet about it. She refereed a dispute over missing stockings with all the tact of a Victorian magistrate. And woe betide the girl who breaks the crockery. That plate was your great-aunt's. She snapped despite the fact she's had the same set since Napoleon. It's not all gloom. On slow afternoons, Mrs. Sprocket might regale you with stories from back in her day, which, if true, means she survived 5 pandemics, and possibly outdrank Charles Dickens. She cackle at her own jokes, nudge you misbrotherly, and if you're really unlucky, threaten to set you up with her nephew, a catch if you like mutton and bad poetry. Button't mistake her affection for softness. When the law comes knocking, Mrs. Sprocket transforms from coudliant to courtroom barista, whisking ledgers into hiding and inventing alibis with the speed of a professional liar. She knows everyone in the neighborhood, from the constable's wife to the baker's dog, and her information network is second only to Scotland Yard. She'll protect her girls within reason, but she'll also remind you that loyalty cuts both ways. Translation: don't cross her, you'll be out on the street faster than you can say back rent. In the end, Mrs. Sprocket is the glue that keeps Theramshackle House running. A walking contradiction, equal parts soft and sharp, nurturing and mercenary. She's boss, your warden, and on rare nights, your unexpected champion. You may mutter about her rules, and curse her love of ledgers, but deep down you know that in the swirling uncertainty of Victorian London, Mrs. Sprocket is as close to safe as you're likely to get. And if you ever forget it, she'll be happy to remind you, preferably before breakfast. Living with a rotating cast of other workers, you learn to sleep through arguments, gossip, and the constant background hum of someone sobbing into a pillow. Privacy is a luxury. So is your own hairbrush. You quickly discover that communal living in a Victorian brothel is less sisterhood and more constant low-level civil war with bonus lice. The rooms are packed tighter than a stagecoach after payday, and there's always someone coming in just as you're drifting off. The walls are so thin you can hear the neighbors snoring, and he doesn't even live in Thebe. Each girl brings her own baggage, literal and emotional. There's Darius, who collects shoes and secrets, and Millie, who can sleep through a riot, but wakes up if you touch her biscuits. There's Lottie, who's been about to leave for a better life, for 3 years and counting, and Ginny, whose Lao could wake the dead, and probably has. Sometimes you get a new girl, wide-eyed and clutching a suitcase, already eyeing the window as an escape route. Sometimes one disappears without goodbye. The cycle repeats. Nobody asks too many questions. The days blend together, punctuated by shared meals, whispered confessions, and the ever-present clatter of someone's boots on the stairwell. At a highly suspicious, you become experts in each other's moods. You can tell from the way Dora slams the door whether she lost her last shilling or just got a love letter from a man who can't spell forever. You learned when to offer a comforting arm and when to leave a cup of tea on the nightstand and retreat. Hygiene is a group project. The bath is a tin tub in the kitchen filled once a week. If Mrs. Sprocket can spare the coal, everyone gets a turn. In strict rotation, by the time you climbing, the water has seen things no water should see. Towels are communal, as air hairbrushes, bonnets, and sometimes unfortunate fungal infections. You guard your soap like a dragon guards treasure, and pray that this week is not week you catch something new. Gossip is currency, traded more fiercely than rent money. Who's got a fancy new dress? Who's sneaking out with the baker's son? Who really broke Mrs. Sprocket's best vase? And why does everyone suspect Millie? At night, you share whispered dreams and outrageous stories, trying to tow one another for the title of most scandalous. In the dark, with only the street lamp leaking through the tretains, there's comfort in laughter, at least until someone brings up the rent due next week. Arguments are inevitable. Sharing a room means negotiating everything. Who gets the window? Who gets the good pillow? Who stole whose stocking? And whose snoring should be classified as a public nuisance. Fights can flare up over a missing ribbon or an unkind word, and sometimes you think you'll never speak again. But by the next morning, you're swapping makeup tips and helping each other tie corset laces. Holding grudges is a luxury none of you can really afford. There are moments of genuine tenderness, too. You hold each other's hands through heartbreak, illness, and the disappointments that seem to arrive as regularly as the morning fog. When Simeon falls ill, the rest rally around, with soup, questionable remedies, and the latest gossip to distract them. When someone gets a lucky break, a good client, a day off, a small windfall, you celebrate together as if one person's luck might somehow rub off on the rest. Privacy, such as it is, means carving out a quiet corner or a moment of stillness before the chaos begins again. Sometimes you sit by the window, sharing a secret cigarette and watching the city move outside. For a few precious minutes, the house is silent, and you can almost imagine you're somewhere else, somewhere with doors that lock and nobody banging on the walls. It isn't glamorous, it isn't peaceful, but it isn't its own battered, hopeful way, a kind of family. A loud, bickering, deeply flawed family held together by circumstance, necessity, and the unspoken understanding that in Victorian London you survive together, or not at all. And if all else fails, at least there's always someone to complain to about Mrs. Sprocket's porridge. You bathe once a week if you're lucky, but Water comes with a side of mysterious floaties. Soap is optional, lice are not, and the best you can hope for is to not catch something new this week. The term cleanliness is in the Victorian brothel more of a theoretical ideal than a daily practice. Hot water is a rare treat, like compliments from Mrs. Sprocket or a polite customer. The weekly bath is less of a ritual and more of a team sport. When Saturday finally rolls around, you queue up in the chilly kitchen, towel and hope in hand for your turn in the big tin tub. The first bather gets clearish water. The last gets a soup that's equal parts mystery and regret. If you draw the short straw, you're basically bathing in what can only be described as community broth. Soap is precious, usually a lumpy bar whittled down to a sliver, shared between 6 girls and protected with the ferocity of a mother bear. If you can't find it, check Doris's pillowcase. Sometimes you improvise with lye, ashes, or whatever miracle cleansing powder is being hawked on street corners this week. The powder claims to remove spots, stains, and moral failings. Results: inconclusive. Hair is lice are less of a problem and more of a permanent feature, like the draft under the door or the suspicious stain in the hallway. You comb your hair with a shared brush, picking out eggs and muttering curses, while Ginny inspects the back of your neck with the seriousness of a Victorian customs official. Nitpicking is a literal activity done by candlelight, with a bowl of vinegar on standby and a profound sense of resignation. Laundry is the greatest trial. If you want to wash your clothes, you need water, soap, and stamina. You boil water over the stove, after bribing Mrs. Sprocket for extra coal, then agitate your schmees until your arms ache and your will to live surrenders. Rinsing happens with cold water from the pump, and drying is accomplished by draping your belongings on any available surface. The fire guard, the stair banister, or in moments of pure desperation, a customer's coat left unattended. If you're very unlucky, you discover halfway through the night that someone's borrowed your best petticoat and replaced it with one that's now home to a thriving population of fleas. Teeth are frankly Alaskos. Toothbrushes exist, but nobody can afford them. You make do with a scrap of linen and a dab of chalk, scrubbing away with more hope than science. Mouthwash, in the Victorian sense, is a swig of gin, swirled and swallowed. Because if it doesn't kill the germs, at least you won't care for a little while. If you lose a tooth, you tuck it away for luck, or give it to Millie, who collects them. For a necklace swears is fashionable in Paris. No one has the heart to argue. Perfume is not just a luxury. It's a strategic necessity. You dab cheap cologne on your wrists and neck, hoping to mask the sense of coal, old bedding, and questionable decisions. Sometimes it works. Sometimes you just end up smelling like rose petals that lost a fight with a gin distillery. Powdered lavender is stuffed into drawers, pockets, and if you're clever, your shoes. On a good day, you almost fool yourself into believing it makes a difference. Disease is the ever-present colds sweep through the house every winter. If one girl gets thicko, you brace for everyone to be hacking by week's end. Skin rashes, boils, and worse, irregular guests. And everyone has a favorite home remedy. Onions tied to your feet, vinegar picasses, or just praying to Saint Apollonia and avoiding mirrors. The doctor comes around only when things get truly grim, brandishing a black bag filled with tonics that are 3 parts sugar, 1 part arsenic, and a dash of misplaced optimism. In this world, you measure health in tiny victories. A clean undershirt, a night without scratching, a week without waking up to a new rash. It isn't glamorous, but it's survival. And in the unwashed heart of Victorian London, that's the best you can hope for. If you're lucky, you'll get through another day with only a few new bites, a tolerable headache, and our sense of humor, if not your dignity intact. There's no Tinder, but there is the time-honored tradition of loitering under the gas lights, dropping your best come-hither glance, and hoping no one calls the police before you get a customer. In Victorian London, Advertising your talents is a masterclass in improvisation and subtlety, mostly because overt self-promotion could land you in jail or rot, the very least in the gossip column of the local penny paper. So, you Mikado with what? You've got charm, bravado, and the thickest layer of face powder in the neighborhood. Your territory is the stretch of street just outside the brothel's respectable facade beneath the glow of a flickering lamp that makes everything, especially hope, look a little bit blurred around the edges. You practice your look in the cloudy reflection of a shop window, tilting your chin just so, smoothing your skirt, and arranging your features into something between mysteriously alluring and definitely not cold or desperate. Thank you. It's a delicate balance. Too forward and you risk catching the wrong kind of attention from the local constable or the dog-gooding society matrons. To shine, you'll spend the night earning nothing but fresh blisters on your already miserable shoes. The competition is fierce. Other girls line the pavement, adjusting bonnets and batting eyelashes, each with her own signature Mikakai. Doris favors the accidentally drop a handkerchief and sigh move, while Millie prefers to whistle a popular tune and hope it's stuck in someone's head long enough for them to wander over. You tree your own mix, a shy smile, a sideways glance, the sort of hello that sounds polite but leaves room for interpretation. Marketing Victorian style is about suggestion. Nobody says what they mean, but everyone knows exactly what's on offer. Business cards are rare, but rumors aren't. If you're really lucky enough to work at an upmarket establishment, Mrs. Sprocket might splurge on a small sign, tasteful off-course, perhaps reading Lady Society Club or tea served upstairs. Everyone in the neighborhood understands the code. Some brothel advertise with a discreet red lamp in the window, others with nothing more than the constant parade of gentlemen callers arriving and leaving at all hours, their hats pulled low and collars turned up. Sometimes you supplement your street-side marketing with a little creative networking. You chat up the cabbies who know everyone's business and can send customers your way for a modest finder fee. You make friends with the barmaids in the market, women leaving behind a smile or a copper or two in exchange for whispery, "Try that house on Red Lion Court." Someone will say, "Ask for the one with lovely eyes." Whether it's true or not is beside the point. The rumor alone is often enough to bring business through the door. Of course, there's always the risk of unwanted attention. The local authorities swing between indifference and moral panic. Some nights, the police ignore the trade entirely, especially if the right pockets have been lined. Other nights, you're dodging patrols and pretending you're just waiting for a friend. A lady never stands on a corner without Ariason, officer. A few unlucky souls are hauled off for loitering, or worse, indecency, which is Victorian code for making people uncomfortable with their own hypocrisy, whether it is rarely your friend. The London fog rolls in, clinging to your dress and settling in your lungs, making every whispered negotiation sound like a Victorian ghost story. Rain turns the cobbles slick and the customers grumpy. You huddle under a shared umbrella with two other girls, laughing about how your hair never looks as good as it did when you left the house, and how next week you'll all make enough to stay indoors and leave the marketing to someone else. Still, you persist because beneath the gaslight, every glance, every smile, every clever little word is a pitch. Soft, silent, sometimes desperate, but always hopeful. Maybe tonight will be your lucky night. Maybe a kind client will cross your path. Or maybe, just maybe, you'll master the mysterious art of Victorian marketing and go down in history as the girl who could sell romance by candlelight. Either way, you take a deep breath, step into the fog, and keep on advertising, because in this city, if you don't sell yourself, no one else is going to do it for you. You wonder if you'll be handsome, rich, or at least mostly conscious. The answer is usual none of the above. You smile anyway. It's called customer service. There's ascertained suspense to those first footsteps on the creaking stair, the pause at the brothel door, the shuffling of feet, as someone debates whether to knock or flee into the comforting arms of Victorian respectability. You hear the faint murmur of negotiation in the hallway, maybe a half-hearted haggling over the price, maybe just nervous stammering. Mrs. Sprocket's voice cuts through it all, soothing and businesslike. "You'll be looked after, sir. We pride ourselves on hospitality." You try to look busy in the parlor, arranging cushions and brushing invisible lint from your dress, all the while sneaking glances at the shadowy figure who's about to make your rent payment possible. The first client of the day sets the tone. Sometimes it's irregular, a coalman with hands like shovels and a laugh like thunder. Sometimes it's a stranger, cheeks red from cold and guilt, clutching a hat like it's a lifeline. You hope for polite, you pray for sober, and yoke-ross yourself for anyone who arrives, smelling more of soap than sausage rolls and the Thames at low tide. There's a ritual to it all, a polite greeting, a forced smile, a transaction so awkward you'd think both of you were trying improv for the first time. You offer tea if he looks like he can afford it, gin off, he looks like he can't, and a tissue if he's already started sneezing. From the dust in the hallway, the talk is never about feelings. It's about weather, work, or on particularly certain days, the merits of different brands of boot polish. There's a performative normally here, as if you're rages to people meeting for an innocent game of charades in someone else's sitting room. You're never quite sure what you're going to get. Some clients want to talk, some want to forget, some want to pretend they're not here at all. The worst are the ones who think you owe them more than you agreed to, as if the price on the table includes a listening ear, endless patience, and the ability to not notice a wedding ring gleaming in the lamplight. You nod, you smile, you offer platitudes that would make a clergyman weep. Appearance is a lottery. Some clients show up in fine suits, threadbare, but valiantly maintained, hoping to pass for gentlemen. Others are in workman's boots, mud still, caked on from an honest day's labor. A few are so nervous you half expect them to faint before the second button comes undone. Then there's the tragic recurring parade of men who seem barely awake, having wandered in by mistake or for lack of fannywear. Warmer to be. The scent of cheap cologne hangs in the air, struggling valiantly against the deeper, older aromas of coal, smoke, gin, and Victorian ambition. Sometimes the client brings a gift, a slightly squashed bunch of flowers, a stale pastry, or memorably a live pigeon. You do not ask questions. You simply say thank you, tuck it aside, and add it to the running list of stories you'll share with the other girls later, when laughter is the only medicine you can afford. And then comes the inevitable awkwardness. The moment the small talk dries, and the real purpose of the visit lingers, unspoken but unmistakable. You put on your best, let's get this over with smile, and try to make it as painless and transactional as possible. You wonder, as you always do, about the secret lives of the men who cross your threshold. What stories they're hiding, what dreams they've given up, what tiny moments of kindness or cruelty they'll leave behind. When it's over, you smooth your dress, fix your hair, and make sure the coins are safely tucked away. You take a steadying breath, offer a polite farewell, and prepare yourself to start the performance all over again. Because in this line of work, expectations are rarely high, but the show must always goon, and if you're lucky, the next client will at least be awake enough to appreciate your best customer smile. Suddenly, the door bursts open, and it's the local constable, checking for indecency. Half the time he's there to collect a bribe or a freebie. The other half you're dodging an arrest. You'd think Victorian London's finest will'd have more pressing matters. Pickpockets, fires, a citywide shortage of good manners. But there's something about a brothel that draws in lawmen like moths to a scandalous flame. You've just finished straightening the sofa cushions, which for the record are older than most of the customers, when the heavy boots thunder up the steps, a quick rap on the door, and then chaos. Someone shouts, "Police," and all at once, the house is alive with frantic energy. Girls scrambling for dressing gowns, Mrs. de Sprocket stuffing ledgers into the tea caddy, Doris calmly finishing her tea, because this isn't her first rodeo. The constable, Sergeant Thistlewhite, strides in with the self-importance of a man who hasn't had to pay for his own supper in years. He sniffs the air, looks around like he's hoping to catch someone in the act of being immoral, and adjusts his helmet for maximum intimidation. Routine inspection, he declares, though everyone knows there's nothing routine about a raid at 11 on a Tuesday. In his wake comes his deputy, eager to please, and even more eager to sample the complimentary gin. For all their talk of cleaning up the city, the police are as much a fixture of the brothel as the rickety banister. If you're lucky, they'll just take a small contribution to the benevolent fund, mutter something about maintaining respectability, and leave you to your business. If you're less lucky, they'll lecture you about the dangers of loose morals while trying to negotiate a discount for next week's visit. In the grand tradition of British hypocrisy, the sternest warnings wallies come from men who know exactly where you keep the good biscuits. But sometimes, a real crackdown is underway. New laws, new mayor, someone in Parliament making a fuss about fallen women and the sanctity of the home. That's when the fear sets in. A cold trickle down your spine as the police start asking names, checking papers, threatening to cart everyone off for public indecency or disturbing the peace. You suddenly find yourself evoluding escape routes upstairs to the roof, out the back window into the alley, maybe under the bed with last year's Christmas decorations. Mrs. Sprocket, ever the tactician, handles most raids with the composure of a chess grandmaster. She smiles, flatters, and when necessary, slips a little extra into the constable's pocket. "So nice to see you, Sergeant. How's your dear mother's gout?" Her charm is matched only by her readiness to hustle everyone into the kitchen and out of sight. You learn quickly. Never contradict her story. Always remember your alias. And for heaven's sake, don't mention that time the vicar's nephew dropped his hat in the stairwell. Still, there's always an undercurrent of dread. Arrest means fines, shame, and sometimes a night in the cells. If your name ends up in the newspaper, that's a ticket straight to unemployment, or worse, your mother reading about your disgrace over her morning porridge. The police know this and use it. They dangle threats and promises, playing a dangerous game of power and privilege, all while pretending they're only here for Thesidy's moral good. You try to keep calm as they poke through the parlor, peer under the sofa, and interrogate they girls with questions so ridiculous you almost have to laugh. "Do you know the true meaning of virtue, miss?" one officer asks, while trying to pocket a handful of Mrs. Sprocket's sugar cubes. The absurdity is nearly enough to distract you from the worry gnawing at your stomach. And then, as quickly as they came, the police are gone. Sometimes with a tip, sometimes with a wink, sometimes with an unfortunate pair of socks. The tension lingers, but soon enough, the laughter bubbles back. Nervous and relieved, Mrs. Sprocket emerges with the tea caddy. Girls appear from hiding, and someone makes a crack about the respectable gentleman off the law. In Victorian London, raids are part of the job. You straighten your dress, take a steadying breath, and remind yourself that surviving the night means outsmarting both the law and the cows it brings. After all, in this line of work, respectability is just an illusion, and tonight, you've lived to see another day. Between the real threats of disease and the fake promise of patent tonics, you become your own pharmacist. Lordum for pain, Dr. Smooth's potion for everything else, and prayers for what the rest can't fix. Your medicine cabinet, in a is more of a box under the bed, jammed full of half-used bottles, broken corks, and labels boasting miraculous cures. Some of these concoctions yelp out from a man with a hat taller than his medical credentials. Others you inherited from the last girl who moved out, or, let's be honest, vanished after an unfortunate incident with a traveling salesman and 3 bottles of hair tonic. Either way, your approach to healthcare is the Victorian version of treat it and see what happens. Lordem is the household favorite. Equal parts opium and alcohol. It's prescribed for headaches, toothaches, heartbreak, and anything else ending in ache. Got a cough. Lord M can't sleep. Lord Num stubbed your toe. You guessed it. After a few drops, the day feels softer. Therum spins more slowly, and your worries become tomorrow's problem. Unfortunately, it's also the reason Doris once tried to climb out the window to have a friendly word with the moon. The stuff works until it doesn't. Patent medicines line the shelves in the back kitchen, each more outrageous than the last. Dr. Smooth's universal remedy boasts relief from all human complaints. Mrs. Enters Sprocket once bought 3 bottles for household wellness, but nobody's quite sure what was in it. Some say molasses, some say turpentine. Everyone agrees it tastes like feet. There's Dr. Muckle's electric elixir, no electricity required. Dr. of Frobisher's iron tonic makes weak women strong and strong women unstoppable, and the ever-popular Barker's restorative balm, Alcerapul's rats. Each claims to cure everything from melancholy to mild scurvy. But most are good for little B-sides, providing a reason to avoid Mrs. Sprocket's tea. Then there are the remedies made at home. Onion pices, vinegar, foot baths, and mustard plasters for coughs, colds, and mystery aches. Few wake up with a sore throat. Millie will insist you gargle salt water and chew on a licorice root until you either get better or forget why you started. For rashes, an occupational hazard, someone always knows a sure thing involving goose, fat elderflower, or a pus that smells like it was brewed in a haunted swamp. The scent alone is enough to cure your desire for company. Still, disease is no joke. Victorian London is a petri dish, and a brothel is the control group. You keep an eye out for fevers, coughs, and anything that lingers. When gin's temperature spikes, everyone rallies. Cold compresses, borrowed medicine, and a steady rotation of dubious herbal teas. You can't afford a real doctor, not unless Mrs. Sprocket is feeling unusually generous, or Somion's favorite client offers to foot the bill. When the doctor does arrive, he spends more time shaking his head and muttering about female constitutions than actually prescribing help. Prevention, such as it is, means fresh hair, if you can find any that hasn't been thoroughly marinated in chimney smoke, and washing your hands with carblic soap when you can spare it. If you're feeling flush, you buy a bottle of disinfecting spirit, a pungent liquid rumored to chase away germs, suitors, and small rodents. You wipe down surfaces, sprinkle lavender, and hope no one brings home anything that can't be fixed by rest, gin, or a hat. And of course, there's always prayer. Sometimes you find yourself whispering to Hover's listing saints, spirits, or the ghosts of better hygiene. A little luck, a lot of stubbornness, and the determination to see another sunrise. In the end, medicine in a Victorian brotheless, part science, part superstition, and part sheer survival instinct. You try everything, trust nothing, and keep a backup bottle of Lordum, just in case. Because when your world is a swirl of dubious cures and desperate hopes, sometimes the only real remedy is Tola, endure, and keep going. At least until Dr. Smooth's next miracle hits the A charity worker drops by with a lecture and a handout, a Bible, a cold potato, and a look that says, "You should be ashamed." You wonder if she's noticed her own stockings are rolled down. This is the daily visitation ritual right after the milkman, and before the debt collector. She stands at threshold with her arms full of tracts, her face arranged in a mixture of pity and determination, as if she's gearing up to save you single-handedly before Her hat has a wilted feather, her gloves are patched, and her moral compass points firmly toward improvement. If you're unlucky, she's brought a friend, twice the judgment, half the snacks. She tuts at the sight of the carpet, the kitchen's battered saucepans, and Mrs. Sprocket's favorite mug, which doubles as a coin jar, and occasionally a mousetrap. "Oh, you poor dears," she says, as if she's stumbled across a family of orphans living on rainwater and dreams. She surveys the room with the kind of gaze that can find dust in a snowstorm, and offers a potato that's seen better centuries. You know the routine by heart. First, the lecture about fallen women. She sprinkles in statistics about lost souls, quotes scripture, and tells you that salvation is just a brisk walk away down to Thelical Mission, where the beds are even harder, and the soup is somehow colder. She asks for your name, which you never give, your story, which you embellish for her amusement, and your plan for redemption. The last is the best part. Plans are a luxury, like shoes that fit, or soap without lye. The handouts are always the same. A dog-eared pamphlet about repentance, a prayer card with a fate dangle, and sometimes a wool scarf knitted by well-meaning ladies who have never set foot south of the river. You accept them politely. No point in rudeness when you can always trade the scarf for half a loaf at the baker later. While she lectures, you watch her scan the room for signs of mortal collapse. She glances at Millie's bruised shins, Ginny's racy new haribon, and your own chipped teacup, and you can almost hear the internal tally of sins. Every so often, she sighed deep, soulful and practiced, then offers you a spot at her Wednesday sewing circle. You decline, as always, but Doris pipes up and asks if they serve gin. The Kirch lady doesn't laugh, but her friend snorts, which is the closest you get to victory. Sometimes the dog-gooders bring more than lectures. There's Miss Peretta, who once dropped off a box of old hats for your dignity, or Mrs. Peabody, whose idea of help involved reading Psalms at full volume while you tried to nap after a long night. Damien, well, and some even stay to scrub a floor or two. But you suspect they find the work less interesting than pastries. They'll tell at their next charity tea. You'll never believe how many girls were living in that dreadful house, Mildred. Their visits come with a side of gossip, which in Victorian London travels faster than the cholera. By dinner, every neighbor knows which Arity called, and whether they brought prayer books or the infamous cabbage stew. There's an odd comfort in this routine, a sign that even as outsiders, you're still a part of the city's nervous system. If nothing else, the Kirch ladies keep you supplied with reading material for the fire, and the occasional potato for stew. As they leave, you promise to think about your future, and she promises to pray for your souls. You both know you're lying, but there's no harm in hope. She tucks her pamphlets back into her bag, straightens her feather, and vanishes into the fog, ready to save the next lost soul on her list. You wave from Theaterway scarf, already tucked away for bartering. In the end, the dog-gooders are just another part of life, a soft breeze of concern that passes through and leaves you more or less the same as before, a little amused, a little annoyed, and perhaps deep down, a little grateful for the potato, even if it's cold. The landlord pounds in the door with the subtlety of a circus elephant. Pay up, or it's back on the street. Maybe you can negotiate. He's single, after all. Ooh, rent day in a Victorian brothel is not so much a date in the calendar, as it is a looming presence like mold or the neighbor's ferret. The tension starts building the night before, when Mrs. Sprocket stalks the halls, gathering up stray coins, and reminding everyone that no one gets a free bed, not even on their birthday. You count out your week's earnings, frown at the meager handful, and wonder if it's enough to satisfy the man behind the world's loudest knock. Mr. Tyndall, the landlord, is the living embodiment of damp tweed and suspicious mustache. He arrives promptly, rain or shine, umbrella in one hand, rent book in the other, and a frown so permanent you suspect he practices in the mirror. He pushes his way inside, sniffs the air, usually regretting it, and glances around as if hoping to catch someone in the act of making money he hasn't yet. His favorite phrase barked at regular intervals: "Business is business, ladies. No pay, no stay." It's not that he's heartless. more that his heart has been replaced by a coin purse. Every shilling is tallied, every delay noted, every I'll have it by Tuesday met with a sigh and a threat. Sometimes he's in a generous mood and gives you until the end of the day. Sometimes he's feeling romantic and offers to forgive. A week's debt in exchange for dinner, a walk in the rain, or something you'd rather not imagine. The girls have a running joke. If the rent ever gets too high, just threaten to set him up with Doris, and he'll waive the late fee out of sheer terror. Mrs. Sprocket faces him down like a champion chess player, ledger in hand and apron strings tight. They do the rent dance. He claims you're in arrears. She insists she paid last Tuesday. He accuses the cat of stealing shillings. She counters by mentioning the leak in the roof. Sometimes you wonder if this is all a performance, an elaborate routine they both secretly enjoy, or at least have practiced enough to earn an encore. The rent collection ritual is both public and humiliating. Mr. Tyndall makes a point of inspecting every corner, poking beds, peering in cupboards, even checking behind the curtains in case someone's hiding an extra lodger, or worse, an extra shilling. The other girls scatter at his approach, some inventing urgent errands, others suddenly fascinated by the state of their own boots. You try to blend into the wallpaper, which isn't hard, since both you and it appealing at the edges. Inevitably, there's never quite enough money. Someone's been sick, business was slow, or the city decided to stage a parade that scared away all the regulars. Mr. Tyndall tuts making noisiest off disappointment and threatens you all with eviction. He's evicted people so many times, you wonder if there's a revolving door at the end of the street just for his tenants. But he's not completely immune to bargaining. If you offered to fix the drafty window or promise to keep Mrs. Sprocket's cat from clawing the stair carpet, sometimes you'll reduce your R's. There are rumors that Ginny once convinced him to accept a pie instead of cash. There are also rumors that he spent a week in bed after eating it. But that's another story. As he finally collects his pile of shillings, halfpennies, and a suspiciously sticky farthing, he grumbles a farewell and promises to be back same time next week, God willing. You watch him leave, half relieved and half worried, knowing that the cycle will repeat. You check your pockets, count your coins, and sigh. Another week bought, another crisis averted. In Victorian London, survival is paid for in rent. And maybe, if you're desperate enough, in pie. And as the door slams behind him, the house breathes out a soon. Until next week, landlord. Until next week, a man in a loud coat promises safety. As long as you hand over a generous cut of your earnings, it's less protection and more subscription service for threats. Victorian London is a city that loves its middlemen, brokers, agents, and unfortunately, for you, protectors. Enter the pimp, though he prefers to call himself a manager, or, for the truly ambitious, your gentleman representing. His wardrobe screams for attention. Oversized lapels, gaudy waistcoat, a hat that would terrify a crow. He shows up in doorways, in dark alleys, ready to take you under his wing, for the small price of your independence, and most of your wages. You meet him after Airway night, as you're walking home, clutching your shawl and avoiding puddles that might be deeper than your career prospects. He tips his hat, offers you a smile lined with more gold than honesty, and talks fast about all the trouble a girl might face if she's not careful. The city is crawling with pickpockets, rough customers, and worst of all, the competition. He knows everyone. He says he can keep you safe from them all, for a fee. Of course, the girls all know his type. Some call him Lucky Ned. Others know him as that one who smells of peppermint and broken dreams. He'll start small, offering to walk you home, dropping hints about how Hauk could help you move up in the world. The stories vary. Sometimes he claims to have connections with the police. Other times he'll tell you about a gentleman's club that needs a lady with just your particular talents. You quickly learn that talent means willingness to work twice as hard for half as much. For the uninitiated, it sounds tempting. someone to watch your back in a city where the law mostly looks the other way. But the catch is obvious. He wants cut, not just a coin or two, but a regular hefty slice of your already dwindling earnings. The price of peace of mind goes up with every week. If business is good, he takes more. If business is bad, he still takes more back as times are tough for everyone. Love, and the protection itself. It's a shit or miss, as Mrs. Sprocket's stew. Sometimes, he scares off drunks and drowdies, but just as often he disappears when things actually get dangerous. There's always the promise of muscle lurking just out of sight. Big Alfie, or Silent Jim. The kind of men who look like they haven't smiled since the Crimean War. But when the constables come calling, your protector is suddenly nowhere to be found, off negotiating business deals in another part of town. If you try to leave, decide you've had no of the threats and the missing money, he becomes less charming. There are raised voices, veiled threats, maybe a broken window as a warning. You learn to walk different routes home, avoid certain corners, and always keep a shilling or two hidden in your boot for emergencies. Yet, some girls do see benefits. A regular protector might mean fewer confrontations with street gangs, less hassle from the city's more predatory customers, and a bit more peace in a world that rarely offers it. There's a trade-off between safety and freedom, between keeping what little you earn and sleeping a little easier at night. It's not so much a partnership as an uneasy truce, a constant negotiation between power, vulnerability, and the relentless need to survive. In quieter mints, over a cold mug of tea, you and the other girls swap stories. Who's paid off? Who's run afoul? Who's managed to outsmart their self-appointed manager? The advice is universal. Trust your instincts. Hide your best money. And remember that in this city, a loud coat rarely covers an honest heart. In the end, dealing with pimps and protectors is just another unwelcome item on the long list of necessary evils in the Victorian sex trade. You weigh your options, count your coins, and remind yourself that every bit of independence is hard-won, and always worth fighting for. No matter how many threats lurk behind those garish lapels, you keep your double life quiet, sending money home under a false name. If only your mom knew the real reason you can suddenly. Siblings. The great balancing act of Victorian life isn't just keeping your dress clean or dodging the constable. It's guarding the truth from your family. Every week you tuck away a few shillings, wrap them in an envelope marked with someone else's name, and send them back to your mother, who is convinced you've found a respectable job in service. She writes back with updates about the garden, news from the parish, and gentle reminders to stay upright and honest in all things. You smile at her words, and feel a knot of guilt twist in your stomach. Mom would never understand. Not really. In her eyes, London is a city of opportunities, offices, grand houses, maybe a nice dress shop, if you're lucky. She doesn't see the other side. The crowded rooms, the desperate bargains, the nights spent counting coins under the flickering gaslight. You imagine her face if she saw you standing on the corner, hair carefully curled, eyes darting for customers and constables alike. Would she cry? Would she shout? Or would Shaggy still look away and pretend not to see? You keep the secret close, tucked deep earth in your emergency shilling, deeper even than your best stash of beetroot blush. You invent stories about life in the city. The work is tiring but honest. The hours are long, but the ladies era-friendly. When your little brother writes to thank you for his new boots, you swallow the lump in your throat and write back about the generous family you serve, never mentioning that your family is really a handful of girls, all with secrets of their own. There's a strange kind of pride mixed with the guilt. You're helping. You're sending money home, paying for medicine, for school books, for coal to keep the fire going through the winter. Back home, your siblings brag to the neighbors. Our Mary works in London. She's very successful. No one asks too many questions. In a way, you're grateful for the distance. The city is loud enough to drown out uncomfortable truths. Sometimes in quieter moments you wonder what would happen if the truth got out. The city is full of gossips, landladies, market women, the odd church busybody with relatives in every street. One wrong word, one letter intercepted, and the whole story might tumble home. You imagine the shame, the whispered prayers, the neighbor's eyes full of judgment and disappointment. Worse still, the pain in your mother's face, the kind of grief you wouldn't know how to answer. Among the girls at the brothel, you're not alone in your secret keeping. Everyone has a story. An ailing father, a debt to pay, a runaway past. Around the breakfast table, you trade coded updates. Mother's doing well. Sent a parcel home. Little Tom's walking now. You all nod, understanding every unsaid word. There's comfort in that shared sip. A recognition that even in the midst of chaos and scandal, you're still Samin's daughter, someone's sister, someone's hope. You try not to dwell on it, but sometimes the homesickness catches you off guard. A smell, a song, the sight of a mother holding her child's hand on the street. For a moment, you're not a fallen woman or a statistic in a church lady's pamphlet. You're just a girl missing her home. But life goes on. Rent is due. The city never sleeps. In secrets like penishave, to be carefully managed. You fold your mother's letter and tuck it into your pocket right next to the envelope for next week's remittance. You take a deep breath, put on your bravest smile, and step out into the London fog, carrying your secret, your pride, and your guilt in equal measure. Because if your mother ever knew, she might weep for your soul, but she'd never have to worry about your siblings bare-fed again. And in a world like this, that's worth more than all the honesty enthralled. Competition is fierce, and the gossip is sharper than a hat pin. You'll learn to trust nobody, especially not Doris, who once hid your best course right before a big night. In the bustling world of the Victorian brothel, rivalry isn't just a side effect. It's practically a job requirement, with every girl vying for the best clients, the prime spots by the window, and the highest praise from Mrs. Sprocket. It's survival of the cest. Forget sisterhood. This is more Game of Bonnets than Little Women. Even borrowing a hairpin is a risk. If it isn't returned, you can expect to hear about it at breakfast and possibly for the rest of your natural life. Class lines run deep, even here. There's a clear hierarchy in the house. The upstairs girls, those lucky enough to work in the finer, candlelit rooms, enjoy slightly better linens, and that chance to entertain gentlemen who might pay in sovereigns, not shillings. The downstairs girls, meanwhile, handle the late-night crowd, the sailors just in from the docks, and anyone with pockets full of coppers and questionable intentions. Moving up isn't just about charm. It's about who you know, how well you dress, and sometimes how fast you can spread a helpful rumor about a rival's bad attitude. Jealousy is as thick as the fog. If a new dress shows up on one of the girls, never mind how it was paid for. You can guarantee it'll be the talk of the house. Millie might casually mention how she saw Doris in the market buying a suspiciously ribbon. Next thing you know, Doris's clientele dwindles. Whispers of unpaid debts following her down the hall. Friendships form and break faster than a cheap comb. Alliances shifting over borrowed boots, missing gloves, and the ever-valuable good word with Mrs. Sprocket. The arsenal of cattiness is impressive. There's the classic misplaced petticoat before a busy night. The not-so-subtle swap of perfume space. Nothing says you're not welcome like smelling like onions instead of roses. And the occasional sabotage off breakfast. Once Jenny put a pinch of salt in Doris's tea. Doris retaliated by telling Snewgirl that Ginny used to be a duchess, but lost her title in a tragic cheese accident. For weeks, the whole house was in stitches, and Ginny never quite shook the nickname. Lady Stilton. Gossip is the true currency here. Information travels faster than rent collectors, and everyone has something to trade. Which client paid in gold? Who received a letter with a pressed flower? Who cried in the pantry after a visit from the church ladies. Trust is rationed out, with care, parcladento, cautious alliances that lasts only as long as it takes to share a bottle of gin. Even then, you keep one ear open for the sound of your name being whispered behind the door. Every so often, there's an attempt at peacemaking, a birthday cake, a shared scarf, an apology for the missing stockings, but even these gestures come laced with suspicion. Was the cake meant to say sorry, or I'm watching you? Did Doris really lose your necklace? Or is she just waiting for you to stop looking so she can wear it to the market? Yet for all the cattiness and games, there are moments when the walls come down. A-toe night, a harsh word from Mrs. Sprocket, or the arrival of a truly terrible client can draw the girls together, at least for a little while. Rivalries are set aside long enough to commiserate, share a stolen pastry, or plot a harmless prank on the landlord bays. In the end, everyone is fighting for the same thing. A little more money, a little more respect, and maybe eye fluck and timing allow a way out. But until then, it's every woman for herself. You keep your secrets close, your enemies closer, and your corsets locked up tight. In Victorian London, class and cattiness are simply part of the job description. Survival is measured not just in coins, but in cleverness, and in the knowledge that tomorrow it'll be someone else's turn to misplace their best gloves. Every soufan you catch a glimpse of the luxury life. Velvet sofas, crystal decanters, and clients who pay extra for you not to speak. For a moment, you can almost forget the street outside, upstairs at the finer houses of Victorian pleasure. Things are, well, not exactly glamorous, but certainly several rungs above the downstairs madhouse and the cold pavement outside. The wallpaper is only peeling in a few corners, and the carpets haven't been mistaken for aspilled stew in at least a month. There are actual paintings on the walls real loyal, not just something a landlord's nephew did as a punishment for shoplifting. And there's a strict rule about keeping muddy boots off the Persian rugs, though that never seems to apply to the gentleman after midnight. Your job on these rare nights when you're summoned upstairs is to embody elegance, or at least to fake it until you can smuggle a leftover pastry from the serving tray. The clients here don't want to be reminded of the city's filth, or the fact that everyone in the room has a laundry list of secrets longer than the average confessional queue. They want illusion? Soft lights, the scent of imported perfume, and women who smile like their corsets are comfortable. Mrs. Sprocket's voice goes syrupy when she introduces you to Thesgists, our finest. She cuss as if you've just stepped out of a Paris salon ruther, then wrestle Doris for the last good pair of stockings. You're given a gown that's only slightly frayed on jewels that sparkle in candlelight, but will turn your neck green by breakfast. You learn to curtsy without tripping on the rug and pour sherry with a steady hand, even when your stomach's rumbling dand. You're one missed step away from disaster. The clients, gentlemen, merchants, the occasional minor noble, arrive in carriages, smelling of tobacco, the inside of a coin purse. Some are chatty, eager to show off their knowledge of Latin or the finer points of the East India trade. Others just want to sit in silence, listening to the ticking of the clock and pretending you're not there. These are the best, honestly. You nod, smile, refill their glasses, and wonder if you can negotiate a rate for staying quiet all evening. It's like being paid to be invisible, which in your line of work is almost restful. There are rules in the upstairs rooms. Voices must be kept low, laughter soft, tempers softer. Mrs. Bruce in room, said a fairy. Sprocket hovers in Thayholway, a vision in 3 Shaws, making sure no one gets too rowdy or too attached. We offer companionship, not chows, she likes to say, as if any of you could afford to make a scene among the silk cushions and porcelain teas. If a glass gets broken or a vase disappears, there's a deduction from Sumion's wages and a long lecture about standards. The food is better, or at least presented with more ceremony. Little cakes, cold meats, and fruit from the market are laid out on trays. The trick is to eat politely, never more than a mouthful, never before the gentlemen are served, and always with your napkin ready to hide a stray crumb. Sometimes a kind client will slip you a treat, or a coin, or even a promise. Don't day you'll have a house like this yourself. You smile, accept the offering, and file it away in the mental drawer, marked things that won't happen, but are nice to hear. For a few brief hours, you can almost pretend you're not a working girl, but a guest at a fancy party, albeit one where the guest list has been vetted by the local constabulary. The illusion ends the moment you hear the distant sound of boots on the stair, or the unmistakable shout of Millie downstairs, and you're back to reality. But for that evening, wrapped in borrowed silk and candlelight, you allow yourself a of luxury, a taste of the life everyone's chasing, but almost no one truly catches. And then, as the clock strikes midnight, the guests depart, the lights dim, and the velvet cushions lose their luster. You change out of your borrowed finery, hand back the jewels, and return to the real world, where bread is hard, rent is due, and the only crystal in your room is a cracked window pane. But for a moment at least, you wear upstairs. And that's something to remember on the nights when it feels like you'll never climb above the streets at all. After hours, the streets get rough. You grip your shawl tighter, glance over your shoulder, and hope the worst thing you'll have to face tonight is a group of rowdy sailors with badam. There's something about Victorian London after dark that makes the shadows feel thicker, the air colder, and every distant footstep sound like trouble on the way. Daytime brings its own share of miseries, but nighttime belongs to Thessady's underbelly. Thieves, drunks, and people who are always up to things you don't want to see in daylight. For you, walking the streets alone is less a choice and more an occupational hazard. The price paid for a slow night or an unlucky client. You make mental notes of every shortcut, every alley that offers a faster route home, even if it's also the favorite haunt of the local pickpocketing youth association. Yakno, to avoid the street near the Gin Palace when the last call rings out, and you've memorized which lamppost serial ways burnt out, and which ones are watched by constables who prefer to pretend they don't see you. Tonight, the fog rolls in thick and heavy, turning familiar corners into a maze. You press your shawl close around your shoulders, willing yourself to look uninteresting. There are dangers everywhere. A shout from across the street, the sudden burst of laughter from a group of men who are just a little too merry, the unmistakable shuffle of someone following a little too closely behind. Your senses sharpen, eyes flicking to every movement, ears tuned to every sound, heart beating fast enough to count the hours. Every so often you spot another girl from the brothel, equally weary, walking fast but trying not to look hurried. There's a quiet solidarity, a shared nod as you pass in the fog. You both know the rules. Don't make eye contact with the wrong person. Keep your hands on your purse. Never stop, if you can help it. You make yourself smaller, tuck your head down, and hope your shoes are quiet enough not to draw attention. Of course, there are wretched gentlemen of the night, clients who linger too long, grow too bold, or become belligerent when refused. You've learned to manage them with a blend of practiced smiles and empty promises, keeping the conversation light and the distance safe. Sometimes a coin changes hands for nothing more than a friendly word and a reminder that you know the beat cop's name, even if you don't. Other times you keep your wits sharp and your escape routes memorized. The city itself can turn against you in a heartbeat. Carriages race by splashing mud while street vendors pack up their carts and scuttle away, eager to leave the night to its own devices. Even the cats look suspicious. You keep an eye out for any familiar faces. People from the market, a kindly old woman who sometimes leaves out bread, or the rare neighbor who'll nod at you and pretend not to see what you're really doing. But it's not always strangers you fear. Sometimes the retrieval is someone you know too well, a rival looking for an edge, a spurned client with a grudge, or the local protector who thinks your earnings are his by right. You cross the street, de Quinto, a narrow passage, and pray they've lost your trail in the mist. Summertime's luck is on your side. The constable walks past just as things are about to turn ugly. The group of sailors decides the pub is more fun than bothering you, or maybe you just walk quickly enough, keep your wits sharp enough, and arrive home in one piece, shaking, tired, but whole. When you finally close the door behind you and lean against the flaking wood, you let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. Another night survived. You add the evening's dangers to the running tally in your mind and promise yourself once again that someday you'll find work that doesn't require nerves of steel and shoes you can run in. But for now, the night belongs to you and to the dangers you've learned to outwalk, outwit, and on the luckiest nights, simply outlast. Before or after work, there's always the local gin palace. Cheap drinks, sticky floors, and fecund of camaraderie that ends in either a hug or a fist fight. The gin palace is where the whole neighborhood comes to wash away its troubles, or at least drown them in something strong enough to burn the back of your throat and make you forget for a few blessed minutes how little you've earned tonight. The building glows with flickering gaslight, windows fogged and dripping from the warmth of bodies packed inside. If you breathe in deep, you get a nose full of spilled spirits, old wood, and the unmistakable perfume of a dozen women, all trying to mask the scent of the city. You push your way through Theodore, shawl clutched tight, and hope you haven't walked in on the middle of a brawl. You scan the crowd. Sailors off their ships and out to spend their pay. Laborers with faces lined from hard years. Respectable men who disapparento, the shadows if anyone from church walks by, and always other women from the trade keeping a cautious eye on the exit. Everyone's here for the same reason, to forget, to remember, or to simply get warm. The first order of business, a drink. You hand over your precious coin and receive a glass of gin that's half water, half mystery, and all fire. There's no savoring, no delicate sipping, just a tilt of the head and a familiar searing taste of cheap courage. You feel the heat spread through your chest, loosening the knots in your shoulders, and for a moment, making you believe that things might turn out all right after all. Conversations float around the room, loud, raucous, occasionally tender. You hear wild stories of ships that sailed off the map and came back loaded with riches, of fortunes won and lost at the racetrack, of grand plans for tomorrow that everyone knows are just dreams. Someone laughs too loudly at a joke that's no funny, and you join in, happy for the excuse to let go. You spot Millie in the corner, locked in a fierce binge gin-soaked debate with Doris about which street has the best lamplight for business. Their argument ends in a sing-along, the words slurred but the spirit infectious. Before long, half the pub is joining in, the chorus wobbling from Ruled Bretonado, a Bordy tune about a magistrate and a pie shop. The singing is terrible, but nobody cares. Gin palaces are where voices and stories blend, where even rivals can share a laugh or a secret bear, returning to their private battles outside. But it's not all laughter and songs. Every so often, things go sideways. A drink thrown, an insult taken the wrong way, a scuffle that ends with someone being hauled out the scruff, or falling into a pile of potato peels near the kitchen. You've learned to duck when tempers flare Anto, keep one eye on your drink, and the other on your purse. And if the barman ever offers a drink on the house Yaukno, it's time to move on. Nothing is truly free, especially not here. Sometimes you catch the eye of someone you know, an old client, a former friend, a neighbor. From the past hope pretends not to recognize you. There's a brief flicker of memory, an awkward smile, and then the moment passes. The Gin Palace is a place of reinvention, where you can be anyone for a night, as long as you're quick with a joke and quicker with your change. As the night wears on, the crowd thins. You step outside into the fog, head swimming, cheeks flushed, and purse a little lighter. The city feels less menacing, the cold less biting, thanks to the warmth still in your veins. You link arms with a friend or two and make your way back to the brothel. Voices echoing through the empty streets. Promises to stick together carried off on the night air. Because in Victorian London, sometimes courage comes in a glass. And if the gin can't fix your problems, at least it lets you laugh at them for a while. The doctor arrives with a black bag and a look of quiet horror. Treatments range from mercury pills to therapeutic bleeding. Sometimes you wish you'd just stuck with gin. Illness is a constant companion in the brothel, the kind of guest who never knocks and never leaves. Someone is always coughing, always sneezing, always scratching at a mysterious rash. The air is thick with coal, smoke, perfume, and anxiety. When you hear the words, "Doctor's coming," you know things have gotten truly dire. Either someone's fever won't break, or there's a new infection sweeping through the house that can't be fixed by lavender water and strong language. The doctor is a fixture of Victorian drama, part healer, part harbinger of doom. He stumps up the stairs in his best threadbare coat, clutching that battered black bag that holds everything from smelling salts to instruments that look better suited for medieval dentistry. His presence turns the already tense house into a theater of whispers and speculation. The braver girls make jokes about the last time he visited. Remember when he tried to cure Jin's headache with leeches, while the rest eyed the medicine cupboard with a little more suspicion than usual. A consultation is an event. The patient, usually the one with the loudest symptoms, gets bundled onto the cleanest sheet and surrounded by an audience of morbidly curious coworkers. The doctor inspects the afflicted area, asks a series of leading questions. "Have all been overexerting yourself, miss?" And then prescribes something that ranges from the mildly useful to the actively terrifying. Mercury pills, for example, meant to purify the blood, but mostly good for making you sweat, shake, and question your life choices. If you're especially unlucky, you might get a dose of calomel, which is essentially Victorian for here. Try this poison. Ifls won't do. There's always bleeding. Therapeutic bloodletting is still the height of fashion in some circles, despite all available evidence and the protests of anyone with common sense. The doctor brings out a razor, or, if he's feeling particularly ambitious, a set of leeches. He assures you it will balance the humors and draw out the bad air. You try not to faint, and the rest of the girls try not to watch. Thou Vivarian secretly wonders if it'll cure Millie's persistent, bad mood. Not all treatments are quite so horrifying, but none of them are pleasant. There are tonics made from herbs and spirits that taste like burnt shoes and smell worse. There's syrup for coughs, liniments for aches, and mysterious picuses that are to have cured a horse once, though nobody can remember whose horse or what it was suffering from. Thy instructions are vague. Take as needed. Rub on nightly. Avoid strong emotions. The last one is laughable in this house. The doctor always asks for payment up front, of course. If business has been slow, Mrs. Sprocket tries to bargain. "Can you take half now, and a cake next week?" Sometimes he'll accept, but more often someone ends up promising to send for their rich uncle in the country. The whole affair is finished with a lecture about rest and good nourishment, neither of which are exactly plentiful on your side of town. Of course, you try home remedies first: onions in your socks, vinegar on your wrists, honey for sore throats, gin for nearly everything else. You swap recipes with the other girls, and everyone claims to have a grandmother who once cured a fever with a cabbage leaf and sheer willpower. Still, when illness lingers or spreads, you know it's time for the doctor. Terrifying as he may be, sometimes his cures work, sometimes they don't. But at least his visit offers a moment of excitement, a story to tell, a distraction from the daily grind. When he finally packs up his bag and leaves, the house breathes easier, even if Thea is no less thick with worry. You look around, grateful for another day survived, and wonder if one day medicine will be more help than horror. For now, you wash your hands, drink your gin, and hope that whatever you've caught this time, it's the kind that goes away quietly in the night. If you find yourself expecting, you're faced with an impossible choice. The options: a sympathetic midwife, a disapproving parish, or a very hasty trip out off town. Pregnancy in Victorian London is the sort of surprise that inspires equal parts terror and improvisation. It starts with missed cycles, queasy mornings, and that creeping suspicion that life is about to get a lot more complicated. And not in the "my client just proposed" kind of way. The moment you're sure, the world tilts. Every glance in the mirror is sharper. Every bite of stale bread sticks in your throat. And every knock at the door sounds suspiciously like someone come to pass moral judgment. Your first task is deciding who, if anyone, you can trust. The other girls might guess before you say a word. They notice everything from the way you clutch your stomach to the fact you passed up your share of gin at breakfast. There's quiet sympathy, but also fear. Another mouth in the house means more strain, more whispers, and maybe another visit from the dog-ooders who love a rescue story almost as much as they love a good scandal. If you're lucky, there's a friendly midwife living nearby, someone who knows how to keep secrets and bring new life into the world with as little fuss as possible. You pay her in coins, fresh bread, or occasionally a borrowed shawl. She arrives at night, cloak pulled tight, eyes sharp, hands gentle. She tells you what to eat: more broth, less worry; what to avoid: Mrs. Froth, Sprocket's patent remedies; and if necessary, what to say to the parish priest if he comes calling with questions you're in no mood to answer. But not everyone is lucky. If the wrong person finds out, an unfriendly neighbor, a nosy parish official, the situation can spiral fast. The parish has its own brand of compassion, which usually involves stern lectures, thin blankets, and the sort of soup that could double as wallpaper paste. Thurrock House is always a looming threat, a place for fallen women to contemplate their sins in the company of 100 others, just as desperate and twice as exhausted. The only thing more terrifying than ending up there is shaving your baby taken from you and sent to an orphanage for its own good. For some, the solution is a hasty trip out of town. You pack a small bag, whatever you can carry, and disappear for a few months to a relative's house or a sympathetic friend in another city. You send letters home claiming ill health or an exciting new position, hoping no one asks too many questions. The child is born, handed over to someone with more stability or fewer scruples. And you return to London, thinner, quieter, and carrying a secret that never quite stops aching. There are darker options, whispered about in the hush of late night kitchens and behind closed doors. Desperate girls seek out wise women who promise quick fixes, herbs, teas, or riskier interventions. The risks are high: infection, injury, or worse, all for the chance to keep a job and a roof over your head. Victorian society likes to pretend these women don't exist, but shadows know better. Yet, even in this harsh world, hope glimmers. Slums manage to keep their children, raising them in the house with the help of the other women who serve as surrogate aunts and cousins. There's laughter and love, even if the future is uncertain, and the beds are always crowded. Babies are swaddled in old shawls, lulled to sleep by the sounds of city life, and taught early that family sometimes looks nothing like the ones in the penny novels. Every pregnancy is a gamble, a roll of the dice with your body, your future, and your heart. Some win a new beginning, others lose more than they ever imagined possible. But through it all, you endure stubborn and soft, doing what must be done for survival's sake. Because in Victorian London, nothing, absolutely nothing, comes easy, least of all motherhood. But hope, like life, somehow finds a way to keep going. Even if you have to hold it tight and hide it under your heart, you dream of escaping, saving enough toast at a shop, or, if you're lucky, marrying a customer who thinks you're just mysteriously interesting. Spoiler, almost no one escapes. Still, the dream is always there, flickering in the back of your mind, like a candle that never quite gutters out. Every girl in the house has her version. Opening a bakery, becoming a seamstress, running a boarding house with no Mrs. Sprocket in sight. Some say they'll save up every extra penny, keep it hidden in a boot or stitched into a hem, waiting for the day they can simply walk away and never look back. The trouble is, life in Victorian London is built on debt. Money owed to Mrs. Sprocket, the landlord, the local pawnbroker, and sometimes two so-called protectors who insist on a share of every hard-earned coin. Even if you manage to squirrel away a small nest egg, there are always setbacks. A week off illness, a slow season, a landlord with a suddenly generous idea of rent due, and your careful savings are gone. The city's a hungry beast, devouring hope, as quickly as it dishes out hardship. Still, you clutch your dream a little tighter each time you count the coins at night. Some girls hope for rescue in the form of a customer, irregular, who seems kinder, a little more flush with cash, and who lets slip that he wouldn't mind taking you somewhere better. You'll learn to tell the difference between real promises and gin-soaked fantasies. The stories in the house are endless. A girl who married a merchant and moved to Brighton. A friend who started over in America. A cousin's cousin who sent home photos in a grand new dress. For every happy ending, there are 100 stories that stop mid-sentence. The man never returns. The shop never repents. The money, if it comes at all, is never quite enough. Mrs. Sprocket is practical about it. You want out, she'll say, with a shake of her head. You'd best. Twice as clever as the world and 3 times as lucky. She's seen girls try and fail, seen them return months later, thinner and quieter. Dreams shrunk down to a coin and a memory. Some come back grateful for the roof over their heads, even if it leaks, and for the company, even if it comes with gossip and stolen hairpins. On rare occasions, a girl truly does leave for good. She pays her debts, packs her bag, and slips out before sunrise, leaving the house buzzing with speculation. You all tell yourselves that this time with ending will be different. This time she'll make it. You look at the M-tide and let yourself believe that someone somewhere got free. But escapee's more than just leaving. It's learning to survive in a world that remembers your face, your profession, and your reputation. Respectability is the most expensive thing in London, and almost impossible to buy back once lost. The best you can do is start fresh in a place where no one asks questions. Some head for new cities. Others disappear into the endless sprawl of London's poorer neighborhoods. The bravest try honest work, scrubbing floors or sewing until their fingers ache. Hoping the money stretches further than their past. Most simply endure. You adjust to the idea that this is your life for now. You find small ways to reclaim your dignity. A ribbon saved for yourself. A morning spent in the park. A laugh shared over breakfast that isn't immediately followed by Mrs. Sprocket's rent ledger. You dream in secret, but you live in reality. Strong and stubborn, surviving one day at a time. And maybe, just maybe, that's its own kind of escape. You refuse to let the city and its shadows swallow your hope. Because as long as you can still imagine a way out, you're not entirely trapped. Not yet. Your reputation is never safe. Especially when the penny papers need a headline. One bad client, one police raid, and suddenly you're the cautionary tale of the season. Scandal is the unofficial sport of Victorian London, and business is always booming. You can't so much as sneeze in public without someone clutching their pearls, whispering to a friend, and if you're truly unlucky, dashing off to the nearest rag to sell the story for a shilling. The city's press runs on shame and speculation, and brothel are easy targets. After all, nothing sells newspapers quite like a juicy tale of vice and ruin, preferably involving a fainting vicar or a missing pocket watch. The penny press delights in details, real or invented. If a raid makes the news, you're lucky if your name is merely a certain notorious woman of the night. More likely, You're a described in vivid, if inaccurate, detail, red-haired temptress, queen oft, underworld, fallen, angel with a heart of ice. You read these stories aloud at breakfast, pretending to be offended, but secretly tallying the embellishments. I've never even owned a boa, much less strangled a bishop with it. A single misstep can spiral into notoriety. Perhaps a client gets drunk and causes a scene in the street, or the wrong man is spotted leaving the house at dawn. Maybe a rival with an axe, Togrin tips off a hungry reporter, or a constable with an eye for headlines makes a name for himself at your... Suddenly, your life is an open book, minus the happy ending. People you've never met point at you in the market. Former clients scuttle past, with collars pulled high. The church ladies organize extra prayer circles for the redemption of certain souls. Mrs. Sprocket tries to manage the fallout with the experience of a woman who's weathered more storms than the Thames embankment. She gathers the girls, issues a strict no talking to the presidict, and hands out new aliases like cough drops. Today, you're Mary, she tells you, and you call yourself Bessie. Nobody ever writes up a scandal about a Bessie. For a while, you all lay low, keep your heads down, and hope the next big fire, robbery, or royal mishap knocks you off the front page. But the shadow of scandal lingers. There's always a whisper, a glance, a little laugh behind a gloved hand. Even old clients get nervous, worried that their own names might find their way into print. The house loses business for a week or two, and you tighten your belt, find new corners to stand on, and perfect your innocent face for when theperish men start making surprise visits. The real sting comes from the hypocrisy. The same people who tesk about your immorality are often the ones who paid for your services just last week. The more pious the public persona, the juicier the secrets behind closed doors. You learn not to take it personally. Shame is a tool wielded by the powerful, endured by the powerless, and sold by the inch in every paper stall on Fleet Street. But not every scandal is bad for business. Some notoriety brings curious new customers eager to sample You learn to laugh at the more outrageous rumors, to trade barbs with the girls, and to remind yourself that headlines fade, but rent is forever. You adopt the tactics of survivors everywhere. Deflection, dark humor, and the occasional well-placed rumor of your own. If you can't control the story, at least you can control how you react to it. In the end, you discover that survival is not about hiding from scandal, but about learning to live with it. Shoulders back, chin high, and a ready retort for every accusation. Your reputation may never be spotless, but your resilience is something no headline can touch. In the game of shaming in tabloids, you don't have to win. You just have to outlast the news cycle. And in Victorian London, that's a victory worth printing. As the streets finally quiet down, you count your money by candlelight, subtracting debts and adding up regrets. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. There's a hush that falls over the brothel after midnight. A soft, exhausted lull as the city outside drifts into uneasy sleep. The last client's boots have faded down the stairs. The laughter and commotion of the gin palace next door have trickled away, and even the omnipresent fog seems to pause. Thick and heavy against the rattling window panes, you sit on the edge of your creaky bed, toes numb, head buzzing, with a battered tin box in your lap, and the candle burning low. It's the same ritual every night. You empty your pockets, laying out coins one by one on the blanket. There's the silver shilling, rare but cause for celebration. A couple of battered pennies, and always a suspiciously sticky farthing or two. Tonight's take might buy you breakfast, might stretch toe a new ribbon, or a halfway fresh loaf of bread. But as you start subtracting grant for Mrs. Sprocket, coal for the stove, a loan repaid to Doris, a bribe tucked aside for the local constable, you realize just how thin your margin for survival truly is. Around you, the house is alive with similar calculations. Through the paper-thin walls, You hear Millie sigh and Matoris. She shakes her purse. Doris humming quietly as she wraps her coins in a scrap of cloth and body down, the Hal giving herself a stern little pep talk about next week being better. It's camaraderie of a sort. Everyone caught in the same game. Everyone quietly hoping for a stroke of luck or a miracle. Mrs. Sprocket, meanwhile, is making her own tally at the kitchen table. Ledger open, eyes sharp, sheathed, last asleep and the first to wake. The only person in the house who never seems to run out of energy or lists counting coins isn't just about money. It's a moment of reflection, a reckoning with the choices and the chances that shape the day. Some nights you come up ahead, a kind client, a bit of overtime, a bonus from a gentleman who preferred talking to anything else. Other nights, it's losses and bad luck, a customer hooring out on the bill, a broken bottle that comes out of your pay, a fine from a police raid that wasn't your fault. There's always something, always a little more going out than coming in. Regrets sit heavier than coins. You'll think of the small betrayals, an unkind word to Millie, a secret kept from Mrs. Sprocket, a smile faked for a customer who didn't deserve it. You think of home, of letters left unwritten or sent with stories you know aren't true. In the flicker of candlelight, dreams feel especially fragile. The shop you'll never open, the savings that never quite grow, the family you miss, and the new one you found here with all its drama, rivalries, and warmth. Yet, there's also a kind of pride. You've survived another day, another gauntlet of cold stares and rough hands and impossible odds. You've kept your dignity, or at least enough to face yourself in the mirror, come morning. The money is never enough, to make it stretch. The regrets are many, but so is the resilience. As the candle burns lower, and the last whispers fade, you tuck away your coins, hiding them in a worn boot or beneath mattress. You draw the blankets up, letting the exhaustion settle over your bones. Outside, the city dreams its restless dreams, but inside the house, sleep comes with a promise that you'll wake and do it all again. Stronger, sharper, maybe luckier next time, because in Victorian London, the night aways ends the same way. Counting what you have, mourning what you've lost, and preparing to chase hope all over again when the sun finally rises. Finally, you curl up under that scratchy blanket, drifting off to the city's lullaby of distant carriages and muffled arguments. Somewhere between sleep and waking, you wonder if next week will be better, or at least less damp. The room is cold, ace-aways, the kind of chill that seeps through the thin walls, worming its way